is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it.
Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, and welcome to it. It is Thursday. The phone number here for you to get engaged is 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. This hour of the program brought to you by Consumers Mutual Insurance. It's a different kind of insurance company. It's a co-op. Simply put, that means you have a stake in what goes on. And for me and my family, it was the best choice in a confusing world of insurance. Find out more at consumersmutual.org. Bringing you this hour of the Steve Gruber Show. If you want to see what a failed foreign policy looks like, turn on any TV set nearby. Russia now running bombing missions across Syria, not attacking ISIL as they had claimed they would, but no, attacking the CIA-backed rebels, our team, the team that we are supporting. They're bombing those folks to prop up the Assad regime in Syria. Meanwhile, look at what has happened in Iraq, where ISIL has taken over large swaths of land there. Look at the loss of key cities in Afghanistan to the Taliban. This president can sit and pontificate in the teacher's lounge about how things should be and how we should all get along. And if we were just nicer to everybody, everybody would embrace America. Balderdash. It's time to wake up. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Shocked were the Americans. Shocked were I don't think the intelligence community was shocked. Marco Rubio called this to a T 2 weeks ago. He said, you're going to see the Russians flying military missions, bombing raids over Syria. It's going to happen soon. He was right. He was exactly right. But for those in the Obama administration, bewilderment. Defense Secretary Ash Carter saying yesterday that the Russian airstrikes in Syria appear to have targeted areas that do not include Islamic State fighters. No kidding, Ash. Carter said he couldn't confirm reports that the Russian strikes may have killed civilians, but said if it occurred, it is yet another reason why this kind of Russian action can and will backfire very badly on Russia. We'll see. Here's Ash Carter.
We have been observing the Russian activities, and I don't want to go into detail about that at this time. But the reason, one of the reasons why the Russian position is contradictory is that exactly the potential for them to strike as they.
It's not contradictory. This is who the Russians have been my entire life. This is who Russia is. They find a partner in crime. They work with them. They work with them and they smile to the Americans. Remember, lying faces and smiling faces tell lies. Smiling faces tell lies. That's what the Russians are doing here. They've done it my entire life. So this is a surprise. Oh my gosh, the Russians are dishonest. No kidding. I find that absolutely shocking. Go.
May well have in places where, in fact, ISIL is not present. Others are present. And this is one of the reasons why the result of this kind of action will inevitably simply be to inflame the civil war in Syria.
Stop.
And why, therefore...
The civil war in Syria, the inflammation therein. Remember, there was a red line that we were supposed to adhere to. The Americans would clean that mess up. Didn't happen. They came to understand that the Americans and their foreign policy was feckless and spineless and clueless. And now the Russians have set up camp in Syria. They're not going to leave anytime soon, I can assure you of that. The Russians are there to stay. They have set up camp, military bases, armed divisions, fighter jets, and a presence in the sea as the Navy has also moved in. Go.
It's ill-advised to take this kind of action in support of Assad only without pursuing a political transition there, and that's why we're trying to get them to that same position. I want to be careful about confirming information.
Stop. Ash, buddy. Your boss, the president, has been telling us since 2012 he would usher out Assad with the help of the Russians. For 3 years now, the Russians have been planning to go into Syria. You fool. And you're going to sit here and tell me we need to usher him out in a transitional period. I'm sorry. What kind of medication are you on? The fact of the matter is the Russians don't fear you. They certainly don't fear Barack Obama. They have no fear of the American military making any stand on behalf of the rebels there. And if that's the case, we ought to just pull out altogether. I mean, why risk American lives and American gear and American treasure if we're only in it in a half-assed way? I mean, why would you be? It's war, boys and girls. Either you're all in or you're not in at all, generally speaking. And Barack Obama doesn't care. As far as he's concerned, he, just let American, power just dissipate. He's fine with that. Let's go to the hotline. Joe is on the line in Owasso. Joe, welcome to the program.
Hey, how you doing, Steve? It's amazing how inept the whole situation and policies that we have become. And I guess we go back to my favorite quote of this administration is leading from behind.
Yeah, my Lord.
Because that's what he made the comment years ago that, America will lead from behind. Well, he's behind Russia, all right? They're going to do what they want. The other thing
they are.
Is that
they're doing what they want. They're doing exactly what they remember this, Joe. Remember this. If you are not the lead dog, the view never changes.
Exactly. But I even more that just, reinforces, and I know I've said this on your show before about the stupidity of humans, is the fact that this guy from from the Pentagon gets up and says, well, the general came in, and within 1 hour after he came in and said they were coming in, they were attacking. That is not the appropriate and professional way to do that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, wait a minute. Does this guy ever remember Nikita Khrushchev pounding his shoe in the UN? Well, is that?
Of course, they don't remember that.
Russia has not changed, okay? And I guess these guys just don't get it.
Yeah, not one thing is going to change. At any rate, thanks for checking in, Joe.
No problem.
The hotline number here is 888-900-9966, the Common Sense hotline. Bring it, my friends. What are your observations? What am I missing? Where should we be taking a closer look? Pick up the phone, give me a call, 888-900-9966. You can also check at stevegruber.com. If you need to go to work and take me with you, click the Listen Live button. Or if you've missed something, no problem. The podcast is there, powered by Podbean. Check it out. We'll be right back. It's the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
You say you want a revolution. Well, we all want to change the world. You tell me that it's
18 after the hour. I'm just here to give my law enforcement friends, gray hair, apparently. Well, for those that have hair, actually. Well, for those of you who don't, just rub that bald head. Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. It's 18 after the hour. Holly Harris here, the Executive Director of Fix Forfeiture. Go ahead, rub that head. Holly Harris, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. All right. So Fix Forfeiture has released some new polling numbers showing that there is overwhelming support for civil asset forfeiture reforms right here in Michigan. Tell us about these results.
Well, I've worked in politics a really long time, the vast majority of my career, and I've never seen numbers like this. 80% of Michigan voters believe civil asset forfeiture laws should be reformed in the state, including 76% of Republicans, 84% of Democrats, and 80% of independents. So across the political spectrum, Michiganders believe civil asset forfeiture laws should be reformed. And after voters hear both sides of the argument, so once you tell them more about the program, the support jumps to 90%. So an overwhelming mandate for these reforms.
I get some pushback, and I make, the light of it a little bit, but I do get some pushback from my friends in law enforcement who say, listen, we are doing what we need to do to stop drug crime, for example. One of the big places where they see tremendous amounts of cash, and they take cash from suspects, from people involved in drug trades, and say, listen, if we didn't do some of these things, the crime would be committed. Now, you're not exactly saying that. What you're saying is that somebody should be convicted of a crime, or something should be more concrete, I guess, before
exactly
their assets
right.
are taken
and I
permanently.
did want to mention, one of the challenges that we have is that a lot of people don't know what civil asset forfeiture is. In fact, in Michigan, only 25% of those surveyed knew what it was. But it's actually, a program through which law enforcement can take your property, even if you've never been convicted of or even charged with a crime, then you have to hire a lawyer, go to court, and prove your property is innocent of wrongdoing, which is an affront to what our entire criminal justice system is supposed to stand for. So what our organization wants to do, Fix Forfeiture, is change the laws. So first of all, there's more transparency. Secondly, the burden of proof required for a forfeiture would be on the government instead of on the property owner, and we would raise that burden of proof. And then, most importantly, we'd like to move the entire process post-conviction so that innocent property owners are never entangled in this process. And unfortunately, in Michigan, we know it happens a lot.
All right. So, in deference, however, to our friends in law enforcement, it's not. I don't believe that these folks are out trying to take stuff from the average citizen. I don't think they're out trying to thieve from Michigan residents. They're trying to enforce laws and laws that are on the books, and laws that allow them to have a multitude of options when it comes to dealing with, for example, drug crimes that can involve tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're doing their level best to address it. Where do you have your issue?
Well, these reforms, let me be very clear. First of all, we don't advocate for doing away with asset forfeiture. Again, asset forfeiture can be a valuable tool for law enforcement, as you just, laid out for us. However, we shouldn't be taking property from individuals who are never even charged with a crime. And it does happen very often. You've seen a lot of the instances of abuse. There was the infamous Cade raid in Michigan where, dozens of cars were seized. One car from a librarian by the name of Darlene Hillenberg. And she didn't have the money. They basically held her car for ransom. She was never charged with a crime. And she didn't have the money to get her car back. So she went 10 months without her vehicle, and this is the woman who didn't do anything wrong. And so, we've just got to ensure, and I think by pushing this process post-conviction, we can absolutely ensure that in Michigan, innocent property owners are not entangled in this process. And I do want to mention, in Michigan, actually, law enforcement has been very supportive of the reforms that are moving through the legislature. The Michigan Association of Police Organizations, really in a groundbreaking moment, the largest police organization in Michigan, endorsed the reforms that are moving through the legislature and even admitted in a statement that there is a perception that this program is policing for profit, and they want, to show the public that, look, we all have the same goals, which are to focus on the bad actors in society. And so, I really applaud law enforcement in Michigan. The Attorney General, Bill Schuette, just came out and endorsed this package of reforms, again, in a groundbreaking moment. So I think as we are having more communication and police organizations understand that in particular our organization, we're not formed out of any law enforcement animus. Actually, the problem isn't with the police. The problem is with the law. And if we can change the laws, I think we can ensure that these instances of misuse of this program never occur again.
And that sounds like you're just trying to clean up some loose ends.
Exactly.
And that does not sound unreasonable to me, because we don't want to pinch people that are not guilty of anything. We don't want to take the woman's car for 10 months. And I don't believe that the law enforcement agencies of America want to take people's cars. But sometimes what happens is it gets churned up in the bureaucracy, and it's lost in there, and it's there forever. It's like mandatory sentencing. I mean, once you're in there, even if a mistake was made, you can never correct it. So I think it's a good effort to try to correct it. I'll give you the last word, 20 seconds.
Well, all I'll say is that if you all care about this, and it can certainly happen to you, call up your legislator. We're pushing this very hard to get a floor vote in the Senate and get to the governor's desk as soon as possible. So call up your legislator. Tell them you support civil asset forfeiture reform in Michigan.
All right. Greatly appreciate that, and greatly appreciate you stopping in. Holly Harris, everybody, the Executive Director of Fix Forfeiture. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
It's Thursday here on the Steve Gruber Show, always trying to bring you some different stuff. I've got 6 headlines here. 6 that should be, talked about that we haven't even gotten to yet. But we will this Thursday on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
Mama, take this bath from me.
Let me tell you a twisted story here. You can keep that music up for a bit. It seems to me, those that are the most defenseless in our society are the ones that need to be protected and armed, but not according to liberals, not according to progressives. No, you see, they think that if a college student is stabbed and gunned down in New York City's infamous housing projects, that the victim should know better. Does that make any sense to you whatsoever? I mean, I can't make this stuff up. They think the victim, meanwhile, they'll say there is no need to have a concealed weapons permit. Not in New York City. Too many guns making it too dangerous, of course. Charlotte Allen here, senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Murdered women should know where not to travel. Charlotte, you should frankly just know better. And if you're not smart enough to avoid the housing projects, well, I guess you deserve what you get, huh? Welcome to the program.
Hi, Steve. I think that seems to be what the housing department is saying. This is a case of a young woman who went to visit her mother in a great big housing project, the Lincoln Project, Lincoln House, as it's called, in New York City. She goes to visit her mother, and then she's gunned down by this other woman and also stabbed. This woman who has a bunch of felony arrests but has not been evicted from the place.
Right, so by rule, she can't be there. By rule, she can't be there. And the victim, just so we have a clear understanding, 23 years old, attended community college, worked for United Parcel Service, working at UPS, putting herself through college. And so her mother decides to sue the housing authority in New York City. Crystal Brown says that there was inadequate security, which seems to be true. But okay, so there's more of the background, and this woman shouldn't be there, and then you can pick it up from there.
Oh yes, absolutely. That the idea is that, well, if you go to a housing project, you ought to know that you're in danger. I mean, that's the argument that they're making. It's really crazy because on the one hand, it's almost impossible to evict people nowadays from public housing for committing crimes, or even running a premise where a crime is committed. So,
well, I'm sure, because I'm sure if you did that, you would be all sorts of accusations would be made. You don't like the poor. You're probably a racist for some reason. You're just a hateful individual. If you want to put people, even convicted felons with, dangerous, violent rap sheets. We can't throw those people out because, my God, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. So the people who the innocent people who live there and their relatives, as this young woman was, are basically on their own. They don't get protection from the security that's supposed to be supplied to the projects. They don't, and then of course they become the victims of crimes, and then the housing project people just shrug it off. The housing department says, well, that you ought to know that this is a dangerous environment. In other words, they're admitting to the fact that they're running a place that's more dangerous, say, than a street corner at night in a big city. So what a catch-22. I mean, it's a tragic and horrible situation. I certainly hope that the mother wins her case, and I hope the courts just kind of laugh at the housing department's arguments because what a situation, putting ordinary people, working people into danger. Basically, that's what's going on.
That's what they're doing. Because here, let's look at the other side of this, Charlotte. We're on the line with Charlotte Allen, senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. If this woman had had a handgun to defend herself and had not been murdered in cold blood, she'd now be in jail on her way to prison because de Blasio and his thugs would have made sure that, well, she violated gun laws. She's making the world a more dangerous place. We must prosecute her. That would have been their mentality because, well, they're mental midgets, frankly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she would have been arrested for some kind of gun violation. What if she'd shot her assailant in self-defense? Then
That's
she'd
what
be
I'm saying.
Bernie Getz. She'd end up going to prison, possibly.
That's right.
It's a situation. I mean, you can't win. And of course, the problem is building housing projects in the first place. They're just a recipe for festering, for allowing crime to fester all in one place and endangering the honest and law-abiding people who live there. One of the problems that New York has had is that it used to have a fairly well-run housing system because it, in fact, would evict people. You could be evicted if you, in the old days, say 20, 30, 40 years ago, you could be evicted if you didn't keep your place reasonably clean. Or you could be evicted if you were having too many men over you or a woman, then you'd be perhaps suspected of prostitution, so you could be evicted. So the places were actually pretty safe places for poor people to live. Of course, all of that changed with the whole welfare rights movement, the notion that people who live in those projects have a kind of entitlement so that you have to prove actual wrongdoing to get them out, and sometimes that doesn't even work either. So of course they've turned into high-rise danger spots. It's amazing that.
Well, here's the thing. They build these. And I mean, you're right. They build these internment centers or whatever you want to call them, because let's be honest, public housing, Cabrini Green comes to mind. The famous one in Chicago. But these government housing projects have been notorious for high crime areas and drugs and prostitution pretty much as long as I've been around.
Oh, they sure have. I mean, the ones I live in D.C. and not too far from a bunch of projects. And I mean, for a while there was basically a drug market run out of one of them because there would be these thugs standing at the gates, basically inspecting everybody who came through, and this constant flow of in and out traffic, people parking their cars, I guess going in and getting their drugs and coming out. This went on for several years. So they're crime central. If you look at a housing project, and all you can think of is, well, here's where all the criminals live, and it's a horrible place to raise. They're horrible places to raise children, for example. But lots of kids do live in.
Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, you're in a shooting gallery.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's not surprising. And there are cases like this constantly where children, small children, young teenagers get shot, drive-by shootings, accidental death of a 3-year-old because some drug guy is basically means to gun down his rival, but he catches the child. I mean, they're dangerous places to live. They just basically shouldn't exist.
No, there you go. Charlotte, I don't know what we do about it, but to blame the victim. This is from the left, the ones that, are always the defender of the little guy, save the little guy. Right. Attacking these folks. Charlotte, always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Steve. Thanks.
Thank you, my friend. All right, there you have it. Blame the victim. The victim gets murdered. It's her own fault. It's her own damn fault. She should have known better. There you have it. By the way, a $310 million winning Powerball ticket sold in Three Rivers, Michigan just last night. Lottery officials confirming now. $310 million winner in Three Rivers, Michigan. I must have friends there. Family. New friends. Yeah, there'll be new friends. Call the Steve Gruber Show with your winning lottery numbers, and we can all hang out together. Back in a moment.
Covering Michigan and the world from his bunker below the bridge. Here is Steve Gruber.
Welcome back to it. It's Thursday. Steve Gruber Show. My good friend Jason Hart back on the program from watchdog.org. He doesn't think I'm nearly conservative enough, but I'll muddle through. I'll do my best. I can tell you this. I'm more conservative than Bernie Sanders. I mean, that's a start, isn't it, Jason?
It certainly is. Good morning. And I think that you're conservative enough. I just think that my governor here in Ohio has pulled the wool over your eyes a little bit. But, Bernie Sanders is well to the left. I think it's safe to say, not just of the two of us, but probably of all of your listeners, unless you have any listeners out there who are communists who think democratic socialists are just way too soft and squishy and friendly to capitalism.
Well, I saw an article, and it wasn't from you, and I read a lot of your material, but I saw an article here, I think yesterday, the day before, it caught my attention. The new love affair with Karl Marx. Karl Marx, the resurgence, and all this. I'm like, really? I mean, do people not have books where they can go say, well, look what happened to Russia and China and, all of Eastern Europe and Cuba, and the list goes on and on and on. Marxism is an abject failure. Every time it's rolled out, no matter how they try to dress it up, well, this time it'll work. This time we'll do this, and it'll be great for everybody. It's never great for anybody, and it never works right. Am I mistaken somewhere?
Well, there was actually a really popular book. I don't remember if it was last year. It may have been a couple of years ago now, by, I think it's a French economist named Thomas Piketty, called Capital in the 21st Century. And the title of the book was an intentional reference to a work by Marx, and it's really popular, a bestseller, if I'm remembering correctly. And a lot of the policies that you see, not just Bernie Sanders, but to a lesser extent, Hillary Clinton, and definitely a lot of the labor unions who support Sanders and Clinton are kind of jockeying for, really take the capital in the 21st century approach to heart. And the recommendations in that book were essentially the same things that we've seen fail across the world over the course of the last century. If there's something that's not working, it's because you don't have enough government intervention. If government intervention doesn't work, obviously you just need to turn it up to 11, because whatever the problem might be, it's not too big or too small for the government to fix it. And so if you look at there's a program out of New York being pushed by New York Mayor Bill de Blasio that's backed by the American Federation of Teachers and a few other big unions that leans really heavily on Thomas Piketty's work. And it's kind of crazy, honestly, to see. No,
Piketty's work is, for anybody that doesn't know.
Basing this on.
Yeah, you should go look. And, this is what is another story I did this morning, speaking of teachers, the National Education Association withholding its endorsement of Hillary Clinton so they can give it, at least their members are demanding that they give it to Bernie Sanders. And so doesn't it just stand to reason, Jason, that the progressives, the Marxists, are the teachers and the largest teachers union with 3 million members in America, and they demand to be aligned with a Marxist?
Well, the American Federation of Teachers did not hold off on endorsing Clinton, and president of the AFT, Randy Weingarten, has been a friend of Hillary Clinton for a number of years now. They endorsed early, right around the time Bernie Sanders was kind of picking up a little bit of momentum, and a lot of American Federation of Teachers members are pretty ticked off about that. So obviously there's a certain amount of support for Sanders for the type of policies that he endorses, and he rails against corporations, he rails against the rich, all of the things that the union bosses themselves talk about.
Let me say this.
is a much more corporate-friendly candidate who may talk like a serious leftist, but Bernie Sanders has been pretty seriously pushing policy that way for decades now.
We're going to have to take a closer look at this, Jason. We're on the line with Jason Hart from watchdog.org. We have to take a closer look, Jason, because in practical application, is there really that much difference between, I mean, Hillary Clinton may put a different face on it, may try to spin it, grammatically, but, and change the words a little bit. But in practical application, she's not much off from where Bernie Sanders is. She just doesn't call herself a communist or a socialist or whatever else. But let's be honest, her policies seem to be, right in step with his most of the time.
Yeah, for the most part, I definitely think that's true, not just of Bernie and Hillary, but of a lot of members of the Democratic Party. One of my senators here in Ohio, Sherrod Brown, back when he was running for re-election in 2012, I did a lot of research into his record, and if you compare the ratings that he gets from the left-wing groups and the right-wing groups, it's very close to Bernie. If you look at his actual voting record, the Club for Growth type groups will rate both of them somewhere around 0%. The abortion advocacy groups, the big government groups, the welfare spending advocacy groups they see a lot to support in the Democratic Party in general. But yeah, Bernie has been a spokesman for the leftmost wing of the party for a long time now, and the labor unions certainly see that, and some of them seem to really appreciate it.
And some don't. I mean, the Teamsters now have said they don't want to endorse Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. They said they're going to back up and wait. They actually want to talk to Republican candidates. The last Republican candidate, for the record, to be endorsed by the Teamsters, Ronald Reagan in 1980. So there's something for you to consider. Maybe the left has pushed too far, finally. And here's something else, speaking of all this socialism and the push left. Congressman Louis Gutierrez of Chicago now saying that Obamacare should be extended to all illegal aliens as well. Of course, I'm not allowed to use the term illegal alien, so you didn't hear it here. But, far be it for me to just be too descriptive. But illegal aliens should all be covered by Obamacare, says Gutierrez. I'm sure that, Clinton and Sanders at some point will tell us the same.
Well, Sanders was a big supporter of something that he and like-minded folks describe as Medicare for All, which would be just one enormous single-payer socialized medicine program. Bernie Sanders was one of the guys who was really out front arguing that Obamacare, as it was proposed back in 2009, didn't go far enough, didn't do enough to centralize control of the health care and the health insurance markets in the government. And so that's one of the key parts of his platform for 2016 is Medicare for All. He's proposed a number of other things that, when you look at it, I think it was the Heritage Foundation kind of crunched the numbers, and their estimate was that over the first decade, Bernie Sanders' proposals would cost about $18 trillion, which is roughly the amount of national debt that we have outstanding that we've built up over the course of a couple hundred years.
There you go, Jason Hart from watchdog.org.